Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Brian E. Roach.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast, video style this time around. My name is Brian E. Roach, the host who does not like toast or coffee or anything that is hot to drink. I don't know why. Anyway, the podcast this time around is brought to you in part by our partner Vintage Brand. Vintage Brand is a sports apparel and gift brand that celebrates the rich history of American sporting culture, and we got some special stuff going on with them, which we'll talk about later. Anyway, this time around, I'm flying solo, which is what I do when I'm doing these videos. I'm sorry, my dog tag thing that I have here is making me go crazy. Anyway, I go solo when I'm doing these videos because it's really me deciding I have something I want to talk about and then just running with it. So, and this time around, I am very inspired by the Steelers' victory over the Jaguars, in the sense that it showed great tenacity on their part, great strength of will, and a attitude that I think can be a springboard to the rest of the season, which made me start to think about the rest of the season. And not just the rest of the season as it relates to the Steelers, but the rest of the season as it relates to what happens if we get through this, and what are our chances of right now the Steelers are the number 2 seed. Are they going to be able to keep that positioning? And what's going to happen if they don't? What's going to maybe happen if they will? So I took what for me is a deep dive into the schedule and the remaining schedule for the primary teams that are in contention for a playoff spot right now within the AFC. Obviously, you have the Chiefs. They're 9-1. Now, I'm recording this on a Monday, and Monday night is the Chiefs-Rams game. So I'm not giving a lot away here, but I don't know what's going to happen there. It's certainly a possibility that the Rams will win. It's a possibility the Chiefs will win. We will have to wait and see who ends up being victorious in that game. But as of right now, the Chiefs are 9-1. They have the number 1 seed in the AFC. The Steelers at 7-2-1 have the number 2 seed. And then you have the Patriots and the Texans, both at 7-3. Patriots are in the number 3 spot. Texans are in the number 4 spot. As it stands right now, the Chargers are in the number 5 spot. And the Ravens, believe it or not, at 5-5 are in the number 6 spot. But that's where things start to get in flux, because the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Colts, and the Titans are all 5-5. So that 6th spot is very much up in the air. Now, let's start under the premise that the Chiefs lose tonight. They lose to the Rams. I don't know that that's going to happen, but let's pretend that it does. Why? Because it makes me happy. Okay, that's the only real reason. My gut instinct is that the Chiefs probably will figure out a way to win. The Rams' defense has been pretty suspect, but let's pretend they lose. They lose that game. That makes them 9-2. At 9-2, that really means they only have to lose one more game in order for the Steelers to have an actual shot at the number 1 seed, which would be home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Anyway, this is what we have left. Now, the Chiefs have a bye following that game with the Rams. Then they have the Raiders in Oakland, the Ravens in Kansas City, the Chargers in Kansas City. They have to go to Seattle to play the Seahawks, and then they have the Raiders to close the season out in Kansas City. Sure, there's a chance the Chargers could beat them. The Chargers are a very good team. The Chargers also just lost to the Broncos. But, with these interdivision games, you never know. I'm going to throw the Raiders games out. The Raiders weren't even smart enough to not, screw up their chance at the number 1 seed by winning last weekend. Anyway, the game I do think is potentially a stumbling block for them is at the Seahawks. Not because the Seahawks are fantastic. They aren't, but that's a tough place to play. So is there a chance that the Chiefs lose 2 more games? Yes, there is a chance. Is it likely? Probably not. I think we can safely conclude the Chiefs are going to have the number 1 seed, even if they come in at essentially 13-3. I think they'll have the number 1 seed because in order for the Steelers to get the number 1 seed, remember they beat us, so they have the tiebreaker over this. The Chiefs would have to come in at the 13-3, and the Steelers would have to win out the rest of the way, so that they only had 2 losses. That takes the tiebreaker out of effect. Well, be honest, the tiebreaker is out of effect regardless, because unless Kansas City ties a game, it's not going to matter. Anyway, then the question becomes, are the Steelers going to win out? They have the Saints in New Orleans. I think it's not that I don't think they can beat the Saints in New Orleans. They have, of the 4 teams we talked about, the Patriots, the Texans, the Chiefs, and the Steelers definitely have the toughest schedule moving forward. It's not an easy or gimme kind of schedule that says, okay, we're going to be the number 2 seed. Because we're the number 2 seed right now. We go to the Broncos this upcoming weekend in Denver. It's a team that just beat the Chargers, so they're sneakily better than they look. The defense with Von Miller has the potential to get after Ben. And we don't always play. It's another place we don't always play well, but we've been playing really well on the road. I think we can win that game. Chargers at home. If the Chargers game was anywhere else, I think that they can beat the Chargers too. If they lose to the Raiders, it'll be a crime. And then, this year, this team is better than the Patriots. They should win that game. The final game they have of the season is against the Bengals, which leaves that Saints game. Is it beyond the realm of possibility that they win out? No. Is it likely? No. They're probably going to stumble at some point. It's really tough. They've won 6 games in a row. This would mean they'd win 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games in a row. That's a stretch to think the Steelers are going to win 12 games in a row, then win 2 playoff games, and then win the Super Bowl. That would be kind of a big deal. That would be 15 games in a row. I think it's safe to say they're going to stumble. I think they probably stumble against the Saints. If that's the case, that probably eliminates them from the potential of the number 1 seed, but it doesn't eliminate them from the number 2 seed. At that point, if the Steelers end 13-3 or 12-3-1, which was what they would do if they lost 1 more game but won the rest of their games. If they end 12-3-1, we need the Texans to lose a game, and the Patriots by themselves will they only have to lose to us, and then we're done with them. So let's look at the Texans' schedule real quick. The Texans have the Titans, the Browns, and the Colts all in Houston. Then they have the Jets and the Eagles on the road, and they end with the Jaguars in Houston. I think the Titans. I don't get the Titans, man. Sometimes that defense is. They beat the Patriots, right? That defense looks like it's a world beater sometimes, and then they lose this last weekend to the Colts, who are resurgent with Andrew Luck at the moment. I actually think that the Titans could beat the Texans. It's possible. It's also possible they lose it. I'm going to have to take the Texans because it's in Houston. They're going to beat the Browns. I think they'll lose to the Colts, though. They're going to beat the Jets in New York. That doesn't matter. And the Eagles, I think, season will be over by that point. Sad to say. So they probably will win that game in Philly. And then they have the Jaguars at the end of the season, who also will not be playing for anything. The question will be whether Houston feels like they still have a chance to get the number 2 seed. At that point, they would be 11-4 at the final game if they only lose to the Colts. If the Steelers haven't lost, or if they've lost 1 game, that could set up a scenario where both teams need to play their main players in the end of the season, and then we'll have to wait and see. I think we can stay ahead of the Texans. The Patriots, as I said, the Patriots have the easiest one of these schedules. They've got the Jets twice. They've got the Dolphins, the Bills. Really, the challenging games on their schedule are the Vikings, they have in Foxborough. They will probably beat the Vikings in Foxborough, although that's not a given. This could be a game they lose. If they lose that game and lose to the Steelers, we really don't have to worry about them. Let's take the safe bet and say they're just going to lose to us. That puts them at 12-4. If the Texans come in at 12-4 and we come in 12-3-1, we're the number 2 seed. Is it likely? I actually think there's a pretty good chance that's the way this plays out. I think the Steelers can go 5-1 over the last 6 games. I think they'll beat the Broncos. I think they can beat the Chargers, who clearly showed that they're vulnerable. I mean, sometimes those division games, you never know. They should beat the Raiders. I know a lot of people are going to be worried about that game because it's in Oakland, but they should win that game. They should beat the Patriots. You want to know why they should beat the Patriots. Okay, we've been talking about this. Look, the Patriots defense is like the 25th worst in the league, all right? They're down there. The defense is not that good. Their offense, while it's better than their defense, is also not that good. The Steelers have a top 10 offense. It might even be a top 5 offense at this point if I had to look. They should beat the Patriots. They're a better team than the Patriots this year. It's not really even a question. They just are. This is not the Patriots of the last 3 or 4 years. This is a team that has a beat-up Gronk, that has a defense that is not a good defense. They don't have the same scariness that they once had. I think they should beat the Patriots, especially in Pittsburgh. And there's going to be some Jesse caught it revenge factor in that game. And then, like I said, I think they'll lose to the Saints. And I think that there is a very good chance that Bengals game at the end of the year is more important than it needs to be. And I think that's actually a good thing, and I'll tell you why in a second. But if this all plays out, right, the Steelers end up with the first round bye. That may be good, that may be bad, but that's the way I think this plays. Now, the next question is then, who are the wild card teams? Well, the Chargers, who are 7-3 right now, I think are pretty much a shoo-in to be a wild card team. And just looking at what their schedule is like, yes, they have games against both the Chiefs and the Steelers, and they may lose both of those games, which would make them, have 5 losses. But I don't think they'll dip below 11-5. And if they don't go below 11-5, that would mean that any of those 5-5 teams have to win out in order to, beat them, to get a higher seed than them. And I'm going to tell you, here's how I'm looking at this. The Ravens, I think, will finish 9-7. The Bengals, I think, could finish 9-7 or worse. I look at the Dolphins, and I think 8-8. The Colts, I think, could challenge the Texans for that division. But even if they don't, I think they're going to sneak in and get the other playoff spot, their wild card spot at 10-6. It'll be the Colts or the Titans, in my opinion. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I think it's going to be the Colts. I'm going to play the hot hand with Andrew Luck here. If that is, in fact, the case, then in the first week of playoffs in the wild card round, you would have the Patriots and the Colts and the Texans and the Chargers. And I think that there is actually a chance the Colts might beat the Patriots in that instance. Again, you've got a kind of a moving forward Andrew Luck who's got something to prove. You've got an offense that is better than it's been in a long time. You've got a defense that's gelling and playing better as the season goes on. Sound familiar? It sounds a lot like a team that's in Pittsburgh, right? Anyway, the Colts could beat the Patriots. Let's assume they don't, right? I mean, there's a chance, but it's in New England. The Colts probably will go up there, give them a good game, and end up losing. So the Patriots move forward out of wild card weekend. And that leaves you Texans and the Chargers. I think the truth is that the Chargers are a better team, pardon my phone, than the Texans, but the Texans have a hell of a defense. And this could be a tough on-the-road challenge for them. And, a lot of times you take the home team no matter what. I think the Texans probably can win this game if you look at it as it stands now. They don't get anybody hurt. they keep growing, they keep building off of the momentum they already have, I think the Texans will probably beat the Chargers and take them out of contention. That means in the divisional round, you're going to have the Steelers playing the Colts. The Steelers playing the Colts, and the Chiefs playing the Texans. The Steelers playing the Texans, and the Chiefs playing the Patriots. Patriots already beat the Chiefs once. Admittedly, it was in Foxborough, but the Patriots already beat them once. That could allow for the Steelers to not have to face the Chiefs again. We'll have to see. They'd have to get past the Texans. The point would be, I think the Steelers could have a home game in the divisional round against a team like either the Texans or the Patriots or the Colts, even potentially. And if that's the case, I like them to move forward in that game. Then there's, even if they're the number 2 seed and not the number 1 seed, there is a scenario where I think they could still host the AFC Championship game if the Patriots happen to win the divisional round or the wild card round and then go and beat the Chiefs in Kansas City. If that is in fact the case, it could be the Steelers and the Patriots in the AFC Championship game in Pittsburgh. And I know that's making everybody nervous as a possibility, but it could play out like that. The most likely scenario is it's the Steelers and the Chiefs in Kansas City. That's the most likely scenario, I think. But we'll have to see how it plays out. If they get that far, that's not necessarily a surprising thing. Look, Kansas City's defense, if they get that far, can they beat Kansas City? Clearly, Kansas City manhandled them early in the year, but this is not the same team. Not even close to the same team that it was earlier in the year. This is a team that has grown defensively, and again, provided that there are no major injuries, which is always a concern. It's always an if. Remember, they didn't have Joe Hayden in that first game, and I think that makes a big difference. They also had Artie Burns playing a lot of snaps in that first game, and unfortunately, I think that also makes a big difference. Cody Sensabaugh has played better than I thought he would, so I'm going to give him props for that and respect. The Steelers have figured out how to keep their defense in better shape, and I think if they can do what they've been doing to a Kansas City team, get pressure on Mahomes, they could win even in Kansas City. Let's also remember, Andy Reid doesn't have a great history in championship games either. He's lost a lot of them. So, don't look at this as like that's an unwinnable game. If you want to talk about vintage Andy Reid, think about Andy Reid with the Eagles. He went to a bunch of championship games and lost them all. And I guess speaking of vintage, we're talking about the Vintage brand that is sponsoring and partnering with us on the podcast this time around. And just so you can see, Vintage brand, as I said, it's a sports apparel and gift brand company, and they celebrate the rich history of American sporting culture. They are loyal, passionate fans dedicated to favorite teams, like the Steelers, in fact, and to the rich history of American sports. If you look behind me, and I'm gonna try and use my web camera stuff, and I'm gonna zoom in back here. This is an example. I have a Vintage brand piece on my wall right back here. You can see this ticket on my wall. That's a ticket with Steely McBeam in it, kind of a vintage ticket stub, right? It's actually really cool. They've got Super Bowl posters from the Steelers. They've got mugs. They've got all kinds of things. And we're going to be having a contest. Details will be forthcoming for the Steel City Underground on the website, that they're going to be having a big Black Friday sale coming up. So this weekend, a big Black Friday sale where they're going to be offering 20% to 30% off of their stuff, which is a great deal. So, for the holidays, this is a fantastic offering. The sale's going to run from November 23rd to the 25th for Black Friday through Cyber Monday. And we're going to have some kind of a contest that's going to allow one winner, to pick something from the Vintage catalog for free. That's pretty cool. So we want to thank Vintage for that. And I'm going to zoom out now because, you don't really want to look up my nose, do you? I didn't think you did. It's unlikely. Anyway, so we thank Vintage for the opportunity to partner with them. Go visit them on their website. You can get directly to it from the partners page on Steel City Underground website, and give them a shout and check out the cool stuff that they have. So, all right, I was talking again about, what happens as we go down the road, and especially if we get through this. So the Kansas City matchup is tough because Mahomes is having, of course, a breakout season. He's got weapons all over the place, but their defense is not good. And you think about that first game, that first matchup with the Steelers in Pittsburgh, where they jumped out to a quick lead because the Steelers were in that, we're going to start sluggish mode, and they were still in the preseason mentality a bit. And they let the Chiefs get out to a big lead, but then they came back. Remember, people forget they tied that game at halftime. It wasn't the blowout it could have been or looked like it was going to be. The Steelers had that game within reach a couple times, but they just were not gelling completely, and that was a defense that couldn't get a stop at all. This defense can. Now, admittedly, the Jaguars are not the Chiefs, right? So it's not the same concept here as an offense. But, you've got a better secondary playing right now with Joe Hayden in there. The communication is better. You've got a defense that has grown throughout the season. They've learned to trust each other. They've learned to communicate effectively with each other. You've got T.J. Watt going nuts. You've got Bud Dupree playing great. Cam Hayward is being a grown-ass man, has been Stephon Tuitt. And Javon Hargrave just came up and was a grown-ass man this last week. You got Vince Williams, who's also having a really good season. And Bostic has not been the liability we thought maybe he was going to be. He's actually played very solid, especially against the run. Do I want to play Kansas City in Kansas City? Of course not. I'd much rather Kansas City get knocked out by somebody else, and we have a home game for the AFC Championship game. But am I terrified of playing them? Not with the team as it stands right now. This is a team that is much, much better than it was earlier in the season. Can they win? Yes. Will they win? Kansas City is a really good team. I'm not taking anything away from them. They can, but will they? Who knows? It's a tough place to play. They haven't had an AFC Championship game there in a long, long time. They're going to be fired up if that's in fact the case. But the Steelers have shown that they can win on the road. I mean, they're 15-1-1 in the last 17 games on the road. We were whining about them being a bad road team. That's not a bad road team, okay? Here's the one thing that I mentioned this earlier, and I think I talked about how it might not be a bad thing if the Steelers had to play their starters in that 17th game or 16th game of the year, week 17. Here's why. What thing we've noticed is when they're coming off a bye right now, man, they don't seem to gel quickly. It's like the bye week gets them out of kilter or something. They looked sluggish coming out of the bye week when they came out of the bye week. They looked sluggish last weekend coming out of the mini bye. And so it might not be a bad thing if they have to play their starters in that last game of the season to get, a playoff spot or seeding solidified. It might not be the end of the world if the Steelers are the number 3 seed. What? What are you talking about? They can't be the number 3 seed. You're crazy. You're out of your mind. It might not be the end of the world if the Steelers are the number 3 seed and have to play every weekend. Play wild card weekend, play divisional weekend, play championship weekend. Why? Because they don't take a break. And without the break, we don't have to worry about that slide after a bye. And look, there are people out there who are going to say that's Tomlin's fault and it's on Tomlin. It's not. It's just not. These guys are professionals. Look, Chuck Noll would have lost his mind if people said it's the player's fault that they weren't up for the game or it's his coach's fault. Why? Because in Chuck Noll's mind, he didn't have to motivate the team. It wasn't necessary. If they had to be motivated, they should be fired. So again, let's not pretend it's all on the coach. The coaches can do what they need to do to prepare the team, but if the team itself, if the players itself are being out of sync or they're just not quite in the right mindset to play, I don't even know what it is. It's just they seem off. And Ben, especially early on in that game, was off. And you need him to be crisp. You need him to be the guy who played against the Panthers, not the guy who played 3 quarters against the Jaguars when you're in the playoffs. So it might not be the worst thing in the world for the Steelers to not be either the number 1 or the number 2 seed. To end up being the number 3 seed, get one home game, but play consistently. I'd prefer the number 2 seed. I'll be honest. Prefer the number 1 seed. I'd rather have all home games. But I would prefer the number 2 seed to, playing every weekend. I'd rather skip wildcard weekend if we can. Just because the season is long and you've got a lot of guys who are going to be, dinged and danged up, and I'd rather get them all back healthy, or as close to healthy as they're going to be that late in the season. So, while it may be beneficial, I like the idea of them having to play against the Bengals, partly because I'm going to be at that game. Me and a buddy of mine from high school, Don Roberts, is coming. It's be his first Steelers game. It's a big deal. If you see me, say hi. But I think it'll be a good thing for them leading into the playoffs to be playing, rather than, especially if they get that number 2 seed, I really don't like the idea of them giving their starters 2 weeks off. Don't like that at all. I'd rather they played game 16 or the 16th in that game against the Bengals. So that's what I've been looking at. I think the bottom line here is as tough as this schedule is for them, and it's definitely tougher than anybody else's schedule in the AFC for the rest of this season. They have a much harder road to hoe than anybody else does. But based on how good this team really is and should be, they should be able to win these games. The only question mark is the Saints. And while I think it's a game they could win, I also think it's a game they'll probably lose. Look, when I did my 4-quarter breakdown, I had them losing that game to the Jaguars. Because I said it in that article that I wrote for the website, that until you prove me wrong, until you prove you can do it, I'm going to assume you can't, since they beat them the last 2 times. They lost to the Jaguars twice in a row. I picked them to lose this game. They didn't. And the thing is, the way that they came back, this is just not the same team. And we said it on the post-game podcast. People have been saying it all week long. It's not the same team as the last 2 seasons, especially on defense. If it was, they lose that game because the defense does not come up with those 4 stops. And I think that is something to build on, and is why I feel like they can go 5-1 the rest of the year, end up with a 12-3-1 record, right, and be the number 2 seed. But I think that they might have to play against the Bengals, and I think that's a good thing. So we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Again, I want to thank the sponsor, Vintage Brand. Hopefully Joe and I will hook back up this week. I miss you, Joe, man. I haven't talked to you in like a week and a half. I hope you're having fun. I didn't get to talk to you when you went down to see Jacksonville, and I know that had to be a blast. We'll see how this week shapes up and what happens in Denver. I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving holiday. Enjoy the food and the football and the family. And remember, it's chaos out there. Be kind. We'll talk to you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.